Hey, everybody. Welcome to Two Mental Chicks. I'm Kay.
I'm Jay.
Today we are back with Al. He's in studio and we're talking about trauma. Remember, we went into family trauma, and when we left, we were talking about suicide prevention and suicide experiences. I forgot to mention, if you're having suicidal ideation or you need help, 988 is the number to the suicide hotline. So let's get a little further into it. Once we were talking about suicide, we were talking about trauma, and one of you mentioned trauma denied.
Denial? Yes, trauma denial. It is that was my breaking point when I went to therapy, was whenever my therapist asked me, what do you want to address? What's your goal? I said, I've gone through a lot of trauma. I want to find a way to get through that. We went through all of it, started writing it down, a trauma journal, as I called it. And I took time to start calling people and just discussing, do you remember this happening? Do you remember, us going through this experience? And a lot of what I've got, especially from older people, was either they didn't remember or it didn't happen that way, which broke me down.
Really? That happens with my mom all the time. I'll bring up something terrible that happened. I don't remember that at all. I thought we had a great time. And it just goes right through me.
It makes you feel like you're wrong, like you're less of a,
Really?
Did this really happen? Was it a fake memory? Am I making my own problems? I had a breakdown. I had my first ever mental breakdown.
Yeah.
Whenever people started saying that didn't happen, or they don't remember that, or, and so I had to start calling people to kind of piece together, do you remember this? Do you remember anything about it? And they would give me a little something, somebody who was there or present. And it started making me realize that, okay, just as I've repressed 8 years of my life, they've probably repressed this stuff too. And they just, haven't dealt with it as traumatic to them.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So can you think of a time?
Yeah, yes.
You want to share?
Of course. There was one time whenever I had a family member just climb into, she was drunk, and climb into bed with me, thinking that I was her spouse. Didn't, go ahead.
Wow.
Yo, yes. Wow.
Sorry. Wow.
Didn't, like I said, it wasn't necessarily a sex thing, but it was being touched, being, 14,
right,
15, 13, something like that.
Right.
At the time, it really messed me up.
Really?
Yes. And so I called that person's spouse years later, and they knew about it because they came in and got the person out. They said, hey, let's go to bed. And hey, sorry, Al, pat on the head. And I addressed it, just last year. Do you remember this? I said, no, that never happened. That never happened.
Really?
And then I ended up going to Easter with them, and I still have to, deal with the person and whatnot in my life. But yeah, it absolutely, nobody admits that it happened, and I'm the only one that remembers it.
So that goes to their sense of denial and their sense of self, that they don't even have the ability.
Or maybe it's self-preservation.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. They don't even have the ability for self-awareness, because if they did, it would ruin everything. Mm-hmm. They'd have to address it. And oh my gosh, you don't want to have to address it.
Well, one of my first memories as well was definitely my father coming home, and let's say I did something wrong. I don't know, I was a child. I'd get the whoopings. I was the youngest. I was the weakest. The angry person tends to pick on the runt of the litter. Mm-hmm. But I asked him about that, and the response I got was, oh, it didn't happen like that. And I wasn't that hard on you. My generation was raised to, we knew our dads were going to hit us or whatever. It was denying me my truth.
Oh, so by denying you that, you were less than a person even because you didn't matter anymore.
Right. It was like, so
Oh.
was I just a punching bag, or did
It
you
didn't
love
even
me?
matter
Right.
enough for them to even hold that memory.
Right. But
Oh.
it consumes me.
Right. Like the scarf incident. Do you have those things? Where it was, well, do you want to call it gaslighting? We talked about that earlier. Would that be considered, how would you define gaslighting, Al?
I would just say, umbrella term, just, usually intentionally making you feel crazy. But now that we bring up the whole, maybe they are denying it or whatever, so they don't feel
right. It's
crazy.
Their own mental health issue.
Right. You're the crazy one.
It takes a lot of courage to own up to your actions. It takes a lot of courage to admit you're wrong. And by nature, people don't like to be wrong. I think people are all a bunch of Fonzies out there.
Boy, that's true.
I'm never wrong. I'm always right. I mean, even a simple task of making a mistake at work, wasn't me. Wasn't me. So that's my take on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Which goes back to not wanting to take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah,
think about it.
They don't.
That's interesting.
Well, and a thing that, like Jay just brought up, it takes courage to admit fault or guilt or being wrong. I've done in my mind, some unforgivable things that I've had to forgive myself and be truthful about. And it is difficult. It is hard to say that, this is who I am or this is what I've done. I don't deserve, love. I don't deserve this or that. And not deny other people their, cause I've done it. I've gotten in arguments, where my significant other says, this is how I feel or whatever. And I deny them that.
Yeah, I have too. That's a good point. That even in everyday interactions. Do you find that?
Yeah, I mean, every day.
Yeah.
You see it everywhere.
That's interesting. So it's a denial and a projection of what they need to hear so that they're okay. So basically they remain at homeostasis no matter what your story is because my story is intact and all I need is my story, right?
Well, I think it's funny too. And I think I told you this whenever I went to my father and told him, hey, I'm getting therapy. This is why I want to kind of rehash this. And now that, 30 years plus has passed, maybe we can talk about this differently as men, as adults, and his response was, therapy's a joke and, this and that. And, it's mumbo jumbo and millennial stuff,
That's what he thought about
trauma.
Marriage therapy too.
Right.
You see where that got us.
Well, and that, on the trauma denial, if you're going through that, if that's something that you experience, you're not the only one out there. There's other people, but, therapy definitely helped me be able to realize it does not matter what anyone else tells me happened or that, this and that. It's me that has to get through it and has to be able to look at themselves in the mirror every day and grow and be happy,
So do you have situations in your life that you would call gaslighting, Jay?
Yes. I mean...
You want to share?
Well, I think it's the people that are the sickest are the ones that are the most unaware of their own self and their own autonomy because they create a false pretense to coddle themselves or soften the blow so they don't have to deal with the reality of it. And there is a thing called boundaries. And a person who's victimized by someone else, I employ that concept of boundaries. I don't have to subject myself to a person that is in their own denial. That's their ship that they're steering and they're on their own course. I choose my course to explore negative things about myself to fix them as best as I can. I'd rather do that than to try to cover up. Because to me, it takes more work to pretend to be normal.
Oh, absolutely. You have to remember all that stuff you say. You have to remember how to act. And that is not easy, right?
That's why I embrace my autism.
Yeah.
Embrace your autism. That's a good way. You should put that on a shirt.
Right. Well,
embrace your autism.
Going off of what Jay just said, how boundaries, that was such a huge thing. And I talked to Kay about it when I first started therapy. I had no boundaries. I would do anything. I was a people pleaser. Do anything for everyone else to my detriment. And it was whenever my therapist, Marilyn, I'm going to shout her out. I love her to death. When she taught me boundaries, I remember when I implemented it the first time, and it felt amazing. I texted her on the app.
Go ahead and why don't you, because this is a new session, tell them what app.
So BetterHelp is the app that I used, just because I could always have it on me. I don't like going to a actual office. It gives me anxiety. Shout out to Marilyn. But first time I implemented those boundaries and I said no to somebody.
Do you remember the first boundary?
Yes. A guy asked me for a cigarette at my shop, and everyone always asked me, and I always said yes. And they've gone up to about $10 a pack.
Oh, no.
So I finally was like, no, you can't. And so he got upset, walked away, comes back, throws me $1 and says, oh, well, I was going to give you money. Said, okay. And
so you gave him the cigarette?
Of course.
Okay.
Well, now, yeah. Quid pro quo.
All right.
So I texted Marilyn that day, because you can just text them anytime as well, which is really nice.
Oh, that is nice.
Yeah. And she, attaboy, just gave me a nice, pat on the back, and it really made me feel good. And now I'm to the point where yes is not my default response. That is such a toxic trait to have.
Well, that's a good way to put it.
I agree.
Default response. Huh.
I had an ex that did it actually recently, and she did not want to do something, said yes, and then told me how much she stressed about having to do it, and this, and that. It was just taking a friend,
right,
somewhere. But
really,
yeah, and I said, yes cannot be a default response.
Right. Well, yeah, it gets you in a lot of trouble with boundaries, doesn't it? Do you remember your first boundary, Jay?
My first boundary was just a couple of days ago. I have a toxic coworker who would not leave me alone, and I had to raise my voice to her. It was very uncomfortable because I'm not accustomed to conflict. Nobody likes conflict, but I had to defend myself.
Right.
And I told her, please step away and leave me alone. And she did for a minute and then went right back to it. So my results were not very lucrative that moment.
Really? So did she continue?
Yes.
Okay. How did it end up?
Well, she got 6 inches from my face and wouldn't stop talking to me about something I did not want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And she was forcing me, even wanted me to go outside and have a conversation. And I said, no, I want you to leave me alone. This is not my problem, and I don't want to talk about it. You need to talk about it to the right person,
right,
not me.
Right.
And it exploded into a situation that she orchestrated and wanted to keep an uncomfortable situation, because I think there's some people that thrive on that. But I'm proud of myself for exercising my ability to state my boundary,
yeah,
without curse words or anything like that. Just state your boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Stay away from me. I don't want to talk about this.
How'd that feel for you?
Good. It did feel good.
I think that's a big thing about boundaries too, is it's a muscle that we're not used to exercising. And so the fact that it feels good to do that one, no, you can't have a cigarette. It has now made me, 2 years later, into yes shouldn't be a default answer, and coming up with these, showing other people and being able to set boundaries. And boy, I'll tell you what, even talking to customers, I've told Kay about some stories where I can now speak clearly, say you're not going to speak to me like this. I'll call you back in 5 minutes, but this is a boundary that I'm not going to let you cross. You will not disrespect me like this. And we, can talk like adults.
Mm-hmm. That's what you need to do. And you know what I realized is people respond to boundaries. When you set boundaries, they're like, oh, okay. Like the guy with the cigarette. Well, I was going to give you money. Well, he'd know he wasn't. But then he realized, well, quid pro quo, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, quid pro quo. I couldn't say that very well. Anywho, that was his response.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did he ask you in the future for cigarettes?
When he had $1, yeah.
See? So you changed his behavior from that point forward as well as your own. So when you have boundaries, you're not only changing their behavior, but your own.
And it metastasizes. Yeah. It spreads to other people.
So next time he goes to somebody and asks for a cigarette, he's probably going to offer them money first. What do you think?
Sure. We can say that.
Yeah, you never know.
Or he may test boundaries. As I think is important too, is there are constantly people testing our boundaries. And, you just have to roll with the punches. And, something that I learned best from that BetterHelp app was definitely breathing, walking away. Because, I always want a situation to be handled right now. Mm-hmm. And realizing that it can be put on the shelf to look at and deal with in a different lens later. Right. Life-changing.
It is life-changing. It's just, and it doesn't have to be that much later. It's like me and the scarf thing. We're looking at 35, 40 years later. It took me to see that from adult eyes. But what you're saying and what I noticed is that if you look a week later, you can see it. It doesn't take that many days later. Retrospective. Mm-hmm. Very important. I need to go quit going.
Well, but yeah, I think that, people are going to deny you your boundaries. People are going to deny you your trauma. People are going to deny you. But that's where it's like you said, you choose, Jay, your energy to look at how you can fix yourself and how you can, improve and deal with a situation. We can't control other people. You can only control your ship.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't. And I think too, pick your battles also with the idea of boundaries. I mean, I have a pending boundary situation going on with living situation. And I'm just not ready yet to address it. Mm-hmm. And that is my choice. My choice is to not do anything about it at this time.
Which is a boundary. If you think about it, that's self-control.
I'm still working on that one. So picking battles.
Yeah, you need to learn how to quit punching walls first, huh?
You're correct.
That is a big boundary. Anger is an issue.
But broken closet mirrors. Yeah.
Yeah. Anger.
But the fact that we're all able to say that, we're still making mistakes. And I think that's something too, is that anyone out there needs to understand that it's never going to be perfect.
Never. If you're contemplating suicide or have suicidal ideations, remember it's 988. Call. I encourage you to call. Do something if you're feeling that way. And like and subscribe to us while you're thinking about it. You've got your hand on some sort of keypad over there. So what do you think, Jay, about trauma and it having to do with your current boundaries?
Well, you can only get beat up so many times. You come to self-realizations that the best thing to do is to care for yourself. Basic things. Eat, sleep, be kind to yourself. You deserve to be kind to yourself. Mm-hmm. You don't have to take the abuse because there's always going to be abuse. And people are inherently selfish from birth. And I think that stays with us. We're all about self-preservation, and deep inside, even though you think as a person that's been traumatized that you deserve the trauma, but really somewhere very deep in your mind, that's not true, because when you're hungry, you're going to eat. When you're tired, you're going to sleep. You're going to self-preserve, regardless of the outside world and what it does.
That's true.
And kind of building on her discussing the be kind to yourself, take care of yourself. That was one of my biggest hurdles to to get over was even jokingly, you know, you drop something. Oh, you suck so much. You're such a piece of crap. Just self-deprecating. And it goes into a serious role where it's like, yeah, whenever I do mess up relationship, I then go from, you don't deserve this. You don't, you know, it escalates very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And having to change that was the most difficult challenge I have gotten to experience. But now it is just second nature. Like
Right.
one thing I adopted is that's the worst thing that happens today. That's a pretty good day. You know, just trying to spin that positive vibe on it instead of feeding on the anger towards myself and this and, you know, codependency. And yeah, I finally love myself.
Right.
And
I
take,
understand. That makes a lot of sense. So what do you think about self-love?
It's important to do that. I always think of there before the grace of God go I, because life is a 6-lane highway going both ways.
So do you think of that as like forgiveness of yourself so you can go forward? Like Al was saying, that sometimes you do such terrible things that it's hard to forgive yourself.
Yeah.
That seems to be the key.
Yeah. And you should forgive yourself as you forgive others. I mean, you think about people in your life outside of your own skin that you love them.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't want anything bad to happen to them.
And if they came to you and said, would you forgive me? You probably would.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So trauma affects every part of every thing that we do and everything that we are.
Yeah.
If you really think about it.
Physiological, mental, I mean, everything.
Because it grows from each other. When you were 16, I remember you went through a situation where you ended up on the street, basically.
Yeah.
And so it was beyond a lot of people's control. And it was unfortunate, but I think it really strengthened you as a man.
Yes. I think that everything that, excuse me, I've had to go through has taught me that, once again, if this is the worst thing that happens today, it's a pretty good day.
Pretty good day.
Pretty good day. Could be worse, but it's a pretty good day.
That's a good attitude.
The rain does fall on the righteous
I like
and
that.
the non-righteous alike.
That's true. Rain, she falls, doesn't she?
Mm-hmm.
You know, trauma denial includes denying your own trauma, which is kind of weird. In fact, it happened with me with the scarf situation, but it was really ignorance, trauma ignorance more than anything. I didn't even realize it. Have you ever had situations where you denied it or were just unaware that it was even a traumatic thing?
Yeah. Whenever that family member, you know, got into bed with me, I honestly did not ever think about it for about 10 plus more years. And I can't remember what I was doing. Might have been as simple as just playing games, but it just hit me that, hey, this happened.
Oh, really?
Out of freaking nowhere, man. Yeah. And it had to really sit there and kind of got me reeling. And I had to think about it. And I was like, oh my God. Okay. And it just began to, I remember
Kinda
more
reveal
details
itself?
and I started remembering the house and I remembered the room layout and
Really?
everything. Yes. And these are, you know, I never thought twice about it. And I was like, oh yeah, we had a raccoon at the time. Remember? And I was like, oh my God. Yeah. You know,
Huh.
yeah, it was crazy how it just, I've never had a repressed memory like that. And I was like, oh my God, this can happen. You can't just block something out of your
yeah.
life,
Yes.
you know, and then when it hits you, it hits you.
Hit you like a brick. How about you?
I've never had a repressed memory.
Really?
No, I haven't. The only time I can think of losing any kind of memory was right after my coma.
Oh, wow.
There's conversations I don't remember.
But
I
those
remember
weren't
some
really
things,
repressed
but that wasn't
memories.
that was more
Yeah, that wasn't
being in
trauma
a coma
related.
and your brain being overloaded on,
Yeah,
whatever
definitely.
medicine they put in you. But I don't really have any.
No, I have things that were denied that happened to me and that happened to me as a child. You know, as you're exploring sexuality, you're like 3 and 4 playing doctor and things like that I don't really remember exactly, But in trying to think back, it was probably not a good thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just remembered I kissed my cousin when I was like 5 years old. So
Oh,
thank you for
my
that.
God.
Like, man, you just memory unlocked, core memory unlocked. Thanks.
Ka-ching.
It's like, oh yeah, playing doctor as a child. Whoops.
Whoops, I did that too. Well, I think the interesting thing about it is that as you go through life, you never stop thinking of these things. And so you will continue to come up with these traumas. But as you become more healthy, you start to look at it differently. And so it's just like Al and Jay said, that they started to use boundaries and they started to address their own issues from their own understanding. So I would encourage you all to do that. I would encourage you to reach out to 988 if you're having suicidal thoughts or ideation.
Shout out to BetterHelp. If you're wanting therapy, do keep in mind if you talk to them about price, they will be willing to help you. It is a lifesaver. And we're not plugging them, but they help me a lot.
Yeah, so kind of technically we are, but we're not a commercial service. So, we're just the two mental chicks. That's all. So thank you for joining us this week. This is Kay.
This is Jay.
And you can call me out.
Have a great week. Bye-bye.